April 11, 1945. A thin, silvery mist clung to the rolling hills of central Germany, softening the scars of war that etched themselves across the landscape. In the distance, the quiet hum of a single Panther tank echoed along a narrow dirt road, its tracks biting into the earth, leaving a deep, deliberate imprint. Inside, 4 men sat in tense anticipation. Each had survived the chaos of countless engagements. Each had seen death up close, yet none could fully anticipate the storm approaching overhead. The Panther had long been a symbol of German military might. Its thick, sloped armor and powerful 75mm gun were supposed to make it nearly invincible. But sometimes, even the mightiest machine is caught off guard by forces it cannot see. Above, the mist swirled unnaturally, hiding the hum of engines that moved faster than the eye could follow. The M18 Hellcat, America's lightning-fast tank destroyer, was gliding through the forest like a ghost, its silhouette a blur among the trees. The Hellcat was designed for one purpose: strike hard, strike fast, and vanish before the enemy could respond. It traded armor for speed, mobility for precision, and in this moment it would show just how deadly those trade-offs could be. Inside the Panther, the crew conducted their morning checks, each metallic clang echoing against the hull like a heartbeat. Their minds were elsewhere, rehearsing the routines that had kept them alive so far, imagining threats in the familiar patterns of war. But the true danger rarely announces itself. It rarely waits for the right moment. And in these woods, danger had already arrived. A subtle vibration traveled through the soil. A branch shivered, releasing a cascade of leaves. It was the first whisper of movement, almost imperceptible, yet enough to send a ripple of instinct through the crew. The Panther's commander leaned forward, scanning the tree line, tension coiling in his chest. What would come next? A sudden ambush? Enemy infantry? Or the unimaginable? The kind of strike that strips a soldier of certainty and confidence in seconds? No one inside knew, and yet the forest seemed to hold its breath, the mist thickening as if aware of the approaching catastrophe. Seconds stretched. Thoughts collided with the hum of engines, the clatter of metal, the silent prayer that the morning would remain calm. But history rarely waits. In less than a heartbeat, the balance between predator and prey would tip. In less than a heartbeat, experience and armor would collide with cunning and speed. And when the first shot fired, everything would change in an instant. Would you have seen it coming? Could you have reacted in time? Or would the seconds themselves have swallowed you whole, leaving only the echo of what once seemed invincible? This is the story of one morning, one road, and the lethal calculus of war that turns certainty into chaos in less time than a human eye could follow. By April 1945, the Third Reich was teetering on the edge of collapse. Across Europe, Allied forces were closing in from both east and west, and German defenses, once formidable, were fraying at the seams. Supply lines had been shattered, cities reduced to rubble, and morale, once the backbone of a relentless war machine, was now brittle, fragile, and easily shattered. In this maelstrom of retreat and desperation, the Panther tank remained a symbol of German engineering brilliance. Its thick, sloped armor could repel most Allied fire, and its 75mm KWK-42L 70 gun could annihilate almost anything on the battlefield at range. Panthers were the pride of the Wehrmacht, often deployed to slow enemy advances and protect retreats. Yet by this point in the war, even these monsters were stretched thin and increasingly vulnerable. The Americans, for their part, had learned to adapt. Encounters with Panthers in France, the Ardennes, and the dense forests of Belgium had taught them that brute force alone would not suffice. The response came in the form of the M18 Hellcat, a tank destroyer designed for speed, agility, and lethal precision. Unlike the lumbering Tigers or even the Panther, the Hellcat sacrificed armor for velocity. Its 76mm gun could pierce a Panther's side with a single well-aimed shot. More importantly, it was built to strike from angles the enemy could not anticipate, to appear and vanish with a swiftness that turned the battlefield into a hunting ground. By 1945, the Hellcat was perfected for these deadly short-range ambushes. On that April morning, the 3rd Armored Division was advancing through a narrow corridor in central Germany. Its mission, pushed deeper into the heart of a collapsing Reich, taking advantage of fractured defenses, poor communications, and desperate German units attempting to regroup. In response, German commanders had deployed a small Panther contingent to cover retreating infantry, protect key supply lines, and slow the American advance. Among these men were 4 seasoned crew members, confident in the capabilities of their machine, well-trained and battle-hardened. They had faced ambushes before and survived, but experience would not guarantee survival here. The stage for confrontation was set in the quiet forest roads of Hesse, with mist clinging to the earth and sunlight cutting in long, thin beams through the trees. Each side believed in its own advantage, the Germans in the might of their Panther, the Americans in their tactical precision and speed. Yet neither side could predict the exact sequence of events that would unfold. The tension hung like a live wire over the road, every detail, from a misaligned track wheel to the angle of a branch, poised to tip the scale in an instant. And in mere moments, that tension would erupt into violence, compressing hours of history into seconds of lethal clarity. The question lingered silently in the mist. Could brute strength withstand ingenuity and speed, or would the Panther, long feared and respected, meet an end almost too swift to comprehend? The morning air was thick with anticipation. The mist that lingered over the forest seemed to slow time itself, blurring the edges of reality, turning every shadow into a potential threat. Inside the Panther, the crew moved with quiet precision. The commander scanned the trees and rode ahead, eyes sharp, mind calculating angles, trajectories, and possible enemy positions. The gunner adjusted the main cannon sight, tracing invisible lines across the misted landscape. The loader ran his hands over the shells, ensuring they were ready. The driver hummed softly to steady his nerves. Every movement was practiced, drilled into muscle memory through months of combat. Yet, despite experience, none of them could anticipate the invisible predator lurking above the tree line. Unseen, the M18 Hellcats were closing in. Unlike the slow, deliberate Panthers, these tank destroyers were built for speed and stealth. American crews had spent years learning how to exploit the weaknesses of German armor, flaws in design, mechanical vulnerabilities, and predictable patterns of movement. And now, after hours of tracking and observation, they had positioned themselves to strike. From the tree line, they waited, engines low and humming, guns ready, shadows against the mist. To the Panther crew, the forest seemed unnervingly quiet, almost serene. To the Americans, it was a hunting ground, a stage set for lethal precision. Small details that would normally go unnoticed were about to decide life and death. A misaligned wheel on the Panther, the angle of the turret resting against low-hanging branches, even the softness of the soil, all of it would contribute to what was about to occur. Seconds, imperceptible at first, could mean the difference between survival and annihilation. Inside the Panther, a private joke caused a brief, tense laugh. The sound should have brought relief, yet it only highlighted the calm before a storm that none could see. The men believed their confidence and armor would see them through, but war often bends the rules in favor of the unexpected. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The air quivered with anticipation, the mist thickened, and the shadows deepened. Then, almost imperceptibly, the first vibration of approaching engines passed through the ground. The Panthers, confident in their power and reputation, were unaware that they were being watched, tracked, and calculated with deadly precision. The moment of contact, the sudden, irrevocable collision of strategy and brute strength, was imminent. In that suspended silence, every heartbeat stretched, every instinct heightened, and history itself waited. No soldier can ever fully prepare for the instant when patience and skill meet predatory cunning. For the Panther crew, that instant was about to arrive, and with it, a confrontation that would compress courage, fear, and the overwhelming force of mechanized warfare into seconds that felt like eternity. Then it began. A sound sharp and sudden shattered the fragile calm, the staccato crack of a 76mm shell cutting through the mist. The first M18 Hellcat had emerged from the trees, almost imperceptibly at first, then with the sudden clarity of a predator striking its prey. The shell hit the Panther's side armor, sending a shockwave through the hull. Metal screamed, smoke and dust filled the cabin. The driver slammed on the brakes instinctively, but momentum betrayed him. The Panther shuddered, slowed, and halted, its mighty frame suddenly vulnerable. The crew had no time to process the attack, only the instinctive knowledge that the rules of engagement had shifted, that the predator had seized the advantage before they even realized it was there. Chaos erupted. The Hellcats moved like ghosts along the edges of the forest, striking from angles the Panther crew could not anticipate. Each shot was calculated, precise, and devastating. The commander barked orders, his voice nearly drowned out by the roar of engines and metal. The gunner twisted frantically toward the attackers, but the speed of the M18s was unlike anything he had encountered. They struck, withdrew, and repositioned, their presence fleeting, almost unreal. Inside the Panther, the crew's training collided with panic. Shells were loaded, then abandoned, hands shaking, minds racing. The smell of burning metal, the acrid scent of gunpowder, and the smoke of scorched steel filled the confined space, pressing on lungs and nerves alike. Outside, the forest became a deadly theater. Trees and undergrowth exploded with each round. Shadows danced with lethal intent, and the Panther's formidable reputation dissolved in an instant. Every attempt at retaliation was met with evasion. Every thought of counterattack was foiled by speed, terrain, and timing. The Panther, built to dominate, now seemed sluggish and cumbersome, every second a reminder of vulnerability. The Hellcats were not merely attacking, they were orchestrating a precise symphony of destruction, choreographed with lethal elegance and executed with terrifying efficiency. Within moments, the Panther had sustained multiple penetrations. The tracks, engines, and turret systems were damaged beyond immediate repair. Smoke curled upward, obscuring vision, mixing with the morning mist to create a tableau of devastation. The crew, once confident in their invincibility, were trapped in a machine that was no longer a weapon but a prison. In mere seconds, a force that had struck fear into countless opponents had been reduced to helplessness by the speed, cunning, and precision of the Hellcats. It was a brutal, instantaneous demonstration that in war, size, and armor are no match for ingenuity, timing, and execution. Then came the realization, a moment so swift it seemed impossible, yet its consequences were immediate and absolute. The Panther, the feared juggernaut of the European battlefield, had fallen in seconds. The crew, trained for countless encounters, stared through smoke-stained visors, struggling to comprehend the efficiency of what had just happened. The armored giant, once a symbol of invincibility, was now a twisted monument to vulnerability, its steel hull scarred and shattered. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of retreating Hellcats and the low crackle of fire consuming what had once been their fortress. The Americans, watching from concealed positions, had executed the attack with clinical precision. Each shot, each maneuver had been deliberate. They had observed, calculated, and struck, exploiting every flaw, every hesitation, every moment of overconfidence in the Panther crew. For the Germans, the suddenness of the strike was shocking, a violent reminder that even the mightiest weapon is not infallible. The Panther's reputation had been earned in countless battles, yet here, against speed, surprise, and strategy, it was rendered powerless. For the crew, disbelief mingled with fear. They had believed in their training, their experience, and the armor that had protected them for so long. They had counted on the Panther's dominance, on its ability to withstand attacks that would devastate lighter vehicles. And yet in mere seconds their assumptions were shattered. The battlefield had rewritten itself around them. Strength alone had proved insufficient. It was ingenuity and speed that had triumphed. The forest, heavy with smoke and mist, seemed to absorb the magnitude of the moment. Time had compressed, hours of experience, years of conflict, all reduced to a heartbeat of chaos. And in that heartbeat, a lesson crystallized. War does not forgive complacency, and reputation can vanish in an instant. For those who survived to witness it, the realization was profound and haunting, leaving an imprint that would endure far beyond the war itself. What would you have done in this moment? Could you have anticipated such a sudden, merciless strike, or would those seconds have swallowed you, leaving only the echo of steel and smoke as testimony to fate's unrelenting speed? The collapse of the Panther was both immediate and devastating. The crew, trapped inside the smoking hull, struggled to comprehend the scale of their loss. Confidence, honed over years of battle, evaporated in the harsh reality of what had just unfolded. Each man processed the shock differently. The commander shouting futile orders, the gunner twisting toward angles that no longer offered safety, the driver frozen as the tracks smoked beneath him, the loader gripping spent shells that would never fire. The tank that had once been their sanctuary now felt like a coffin, every metal surface a reminder of vulnerability. Outside, the Hellcats moved with calculated precision, repositioning through the forest with ghost-like speed. Their movements were almost choreographed, a lethal dance that left the Germans with no opportunity to counter. Every round fired, every maneuver executed, reinforced the lesson: brute force alone cannot overcome strategy executed at speed. The Panther, slow to react against such an agile adversary, became a symbol of obsolescence even before it was physically destroyed. The sheer efficiency of the attack left a mark far beyond the battlefield. It was a psychological hammer, breaking morale while leaving bodies and machinery in ruin. The collapse extended beyond the tank itself. For the surrounding German units, news of the Panther's destruction rippled quickly. Morale, already fragile in these final weeks of the Reich, took another hit. The idea that their armored superiority could secure safety, even for a moment, was shattered. Even the most battle-hardened soldiers began to question their assumptions, realizing that every move could be exploited, every confidence betrayed by speed, cunning, and precision. And yet, in the midst of devastation, there was a haunting clarity. War is unrelenting, impartial, and unforgiving. Machines, no matter how powerful, cannot substitute for awareness, adaptability, and timing. The Panther's demise illustrated this in brutal terms, leaving behind not just wreckage, but a lesson carved into steel and memory alike. Can you imagine witnessing that? To see an unstoppable force undone before your eyes, reduced to a smoldering husk by enemies who struck faster than thought itself. What would that teach you about the fragility of power, the illusion of control, and the merciless calculus of battle? When the smoke finally cleared, the forest was silent in a way that felt unnatural, almost reverent. The remnants of the Panther lay twisted, charred, and broken, a stark monument to how quickly fortune can turn in war. The crew, shaken and soot-stained, emerged cautiously, their bodies stiff, their eyes wide with disbelief. They had survived the strike, but survival did not erase the shock, the raw, visceral understanding that the machine they had, trusted above all else, had failed them in seconds. Around them, the battlefield was littered with debris, fragments of armor, splintered wood from trees torn apart by shell fire, and the faint, acrid scent of burned fuel that clung to the mist. From a safe distance, the Hellcat crews regrouped, engines purring as they exchanged terse nods. To them, the encounter had been a tactical triumph. Every movement, every calculated angle, every shot had been executed with precision, exploiting the Panther's weaknesses without hesitation. Reports would later describe the ambush in meticulous detail: the speed, the efficiency, the psychological impact on the German crews. For the Americans, it validated a doctrine that had been honed through experience, mobility, strategy, and timing could overcome brute force. The battlefield, in that brief encounter, had been a laboratory for lethal efficiency. For the Germans, the consequences extended beyond the destruction of a single tank. The loss of even one Panther during the final weeks of the war had an outsized effect. Defensive positions were left vulnerable, retreat routes exposed, and morale fractured. The psychological impact, seeing a symbol of invincibility destroyed so quickly, was profound. Soldiers began to doubt not only the machines they relied on, but their own ability to control outcomes in a rapidly changing war. Each encounter with these fast, lethal Hellcats reinforced the harsh lesson: superiority on paper does not guarantee survival on the battlefield. Yet amidst the wreckage, there was a lingering sense of resilience. Soldiers took note of mistakes, learned the lessons, and carried on, even as the inevitability of defeat loomed closer. That morning became emblematic of the brutal arithmetic of modern warfare, where timing, ingenuity, and precision could render even the mightiest weapon impotent. It was a reminder that survival, strategy, and adaptation often outweigh brute strength in the merciless calculus of battle. Decades later, the image of that Panther, reduced to a twisted, smoking husk within seconds, remains a haunting symbol of the unforgiving nature of war. It was more than the destruction of a single tank. It was a vivid lesson in the limits of strength, the power of speed, and the decisive role of strategy. The M18 Hellcats, light, fast, and ruthlessly precise, had demonstrated a truth that would resonate far beyond that forest road in Hesse. No matter how formidable a machine, human ingenuity and tactical execution can overturn the expected. In those fleeting moments, a myth of invincibility was shattered, leaving behind a stark and unforgettable testament to the relentless evolution of warfare. Historians and veterans alike reflect on moments such as this not merely for their tactical significance, but for the insight they provide into the psychology of combat. The Panther crew, seasoned and battle-hardened, faced an enemy that thought differently, acted faster, and exploited every weakness with calculated efficiency. Hours, even years of experience could not shield them from the suddenness of the attack. It was a compressed collision of preparation and improvisation, a snapshot of war's capacity to redefine reality in an instant. That morning, the rules of engagement were rewritten in smoke and steel, and the implications would ripple across the final weeks of the European theater. The legacy of that engagement is not just about vehicles or firepower, it is about perception, timing, and the delicate calculus of survival. The Panther's fall reminds us that assumptions of invincibility can be devastatingly fragile, that even the most powerful forces are vulnerable to audacity and speed. It challenges us to consider the unpredictable nature of history, where a few seconds can tip the scales and determine outcomes far beyond the immediate battlefield. And yet, in that devastation, there is also reflection, a reminder of the human element, of courage and fear intertwined, of calculation and instinct clashing under the unforgiving gaze of war. History remembers the Panther not merely for what it was, but for what it taught about vulnerability, adaptation, and the relentless demands of survival. Do you think history could have gone differently? Could one split-second decision, one moment of insight have changed the outcome? Or was the momentum of change, swift, precise, and unstoppable, always destined to decide the fate of men, machines, and the battlefield itself?